Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Uh I'm back. I've actually been sick for the last 4 days. It has not been fun. So if my voice does not sound great, that would be why. Uh my god. So today's video obviously not uh what I had promised of a book review. And I apologize sincerely. I may have been sick, but usually when I'm sick, I just don't end up reading anything because you germs on books. It's honestly why I don't want to get my any germy sickness hands on my books. Don't judge me. But yeah, so welcome to what this video is, which is a very opinionated video of why I think first person is trash compared to third person when it pertains to specifically sci-fi or fantasy and even dystopians. Now, this is a hot take because I've seen so many things online. I've seen so many opinions around this, and a lot of opinions skew a little more towards the first person side. Kind of. I've seen a lot of opinions skew to both, but a lot of people do love first person. So, little hot take from me. Uh, but honestly, anyone who's seen any of my book hauls knows that I prefer third person. And it's a very specific type of third person that I prefer, but we'll get into that a little later in the video. Now that I've written nothing down, this is not scripted. I don't these are just opinions and reasons. This is an opinion and this is my reasons for the opinion, but not in any particular order. So I'm gonna have fun editing this later. Let's talk a little about why I think that first person is trash for sci-fi, fantasy, and even dystopia. Um, which are all the genres that I read. So here's the thing. First person is great for those that can get into it. But often, so for me, personally, as a reader, this is me as a reader, not quite as a writer. First person is harder for me to get into because if the character is not really like me, then I get pulled out of it so quick. I get pulled out of any immersion real quick. And honestly, it's really awful. I'm really bad at being able to get myself into first person books. And maybe that has something to do with um my aphantasia as well, because the I find that a lot of descriptors in first person aren't as detailed, so if I wanted to visualize it and draw it, because that's what I would have to do, it's harder to be able to do that. Of course, there are some people that prefer that, and that's totally fine. We all have our own little preferences. But this is my preference. Now, another reason why I think first person is just trashy is getting world building in there. Like you have to do a lot of world building for all three, fantasy, sci-fi, and dystopian. You have to do a lot of world building for all of those genres. But I find that world building in first persons is kind of a little like not very there. Now you can have vague world building and it works. It works for some books and some worlds. But there are times when you need to have more complex world building, especially if it's in a world that does not exist. If it's a dystopian, which is just like a futuristic world where things have just gone wrong, like it's fine to have a little more vague world building. It's nicer to have less vagueness, but you know what? It can work, and sci-fi, you kind of need details. Sci-fi is one of those genres that's a lot of world building that you need to get into. So yeah, it's it's the vague world building that gets me because like now I'm speaking as someone who writes. You do so much world building work when writing a novel that's based in a fantasy world, in a dystopian world, or in a science fiction world. You do so much world building. You do so much of it. And if you're not putting all of that information in there, things can get confusing. Like, real confusing. It's honestly real bad. But yeah, those are my main reasons why first person trashy. Can't get into it as easy, get pulled out easy, really easy. World building's kind of not there as much as in third person. And, well, that's really it off the top of my head. Next, we're going to talk about why third person works with all of this. Um, Frankly, third person works a lot better because you're not reading an I, me kind of thing. You are objectively an observer. The narrator is the observer, and so you can jump into the position of the narrator. It's a lot easier because it's not as opinionated. It's not as unreliable. Now, if you want to bring the unreliableness from like first person to third person, there's a way to do it. And that is by writing in third person limited. Because there are two, yeah, I think it's just two versions of third person. There's third person limited, and then there's third person omniscient. Now, the difference between these, uh, and you can have kind of a mixed bag of the two, but yeah, the main difference is third person limited is you are focusing on one character. So it's that character's point of view, and you are only able to observe. So the narrator's only able to pull their thoughts and observe the others outside of their thoughts. Essentially, I hope I explained that right. And third person omniscient is you're able to pull the thoughts of basically everyone. Now, I write in third person limited because I still want some of that unreliable narrator. I still want some of it, not all, because that's awful. A lot of writers I find like they really rely on that unreliable narrator, and it can get annoying real fast. Real fast, which is honestly why I don't like first person because it's such an unreliable narrator. And yes, it works for certain things. Like I find that first person would be much better and easier for like romance novels, contemporary novels, like all of these novels that don't take place in a fantastical world. It's just my opinion, but you know what? I think it's a solid opinion. Uh, Honestly, I'm gonna be straight with you guys. Third person uh omniscient is hardly ever used. So when a lot of people think of third person, they actually think of third person limited because it's really that's the one that a lot of authors choose to write in purely because it is it is actually easier to write in, and it is so much easier to read. For a lot of things, you don't want to use third person omniscient because you get a peek into every single person at the same time. It's really awful. It's very hard to keep track of, especially for books that have like an ensemble character cast, like I do in my books. So yes, third person limited is honestly the peak, the best kind of POV for fantasy, sci-fi, and dystopian. Now, of course, this doesn't always work. Uh, there have been books that are third person limited that just don't hit the mark. And honestly, I'm going to tell you why I think those ones don't hit the mark. Now, I'm also going to say a little controversial opinion here. Um, most dystopian books I have read that have been in first person, I have not particularly been fond of. And here's where the opinions fire. Divergent had a strong, solid start. But as soon as there was like more to do for Divergent, like Insurgent started falling fast. And Allegiant, oh my god. Don't even get me started on Allegiant. I'm not even going to enter that field. Because I believe I did some book talks on this like early days. Bad videos. Uh and I think at the time when I had read them, I was emotionally invested. But looking back at it, they were not great books, in my opinion. No, they're mediocre at best. And another series not crazy about is The Maze Runner. Yeah, those both are written in first person, I believe. And while it can work sometimes, did not work very well here. I mean, first person actually worked a lot better for the first book of The Maze Runner, just because Thomas doesn't have any memories. He doesn't know anything about the past or anything around there. So that's completely fine, but somehow the books just got so much worse. And I think it's like a combination of the fact that first person is kind of hard to bring in all of this world building, especially since I think at the end of the first book in the Maze Runner series, they're supposed to have their memories, so like you're not actually learning much after that. So world building just kind of like takes a dip out, and but you still don't know a whole lot. These two books are prime examples of why I think like first person kind of sucks for specific world building. Like you could get away with a limited third person POV with the Maze Runner specifically, as well as with Divergent. And it could be so much better. Like I could rewrite those in third person and it would be so much better. And I could take basically the same story. And if I had the like full detail of world building from the Maze Runner specifically. Uh, there was quite a bit of world building for Divergent. I think it's just the way the events folded out kind of didn't make sense. Um, but I could if I could rewrite those books in third person limited. Speak to third person limited. You still have that unreliable narrator. You still have all of this other stuff from the first person, but it allows you to build on the world a lot more seamlessly, and it allows you to introduce a lot of things like that weren't able to be seamlessly fit for first person. Now, I'm not like trashing on Veronica Ralph and James Dashner here, but I just feel like if it was written by with third person limited, it could have been a lot better, a lot more readable. Um, but you know what? That's my unpopular opinion. Now there are plenty of examples where first person has worked for fantasies. There's actually quite a few that I have enjoyed and haven't really noticed that it's first person purely because the writing style is so good and and you kind of get a feel for a lot of things. Now, and world building is it is important, but it's not as important with these. Now, with all of that, like it's Defend the Dawn, right? Yeah, yeah. Like Defy the Night and Defend the Dawn, first person writing. I hardly notice that those are first person because the writing style is so good, and frankly, the world of Defy the Night is not as fantastical as, say, my own book. So, first person can work there because there's no real, like, magic in that world. There's a moonflower that's curing a mysterious illness, and Harrison has another illness that they don't put words to, but I have a feeling I know what it is. I'm going to do a video about that later. um, but yeah, it's so bizarre. So bizarre. Like, certain books, first person can work with because the world is not as complex as, say, my own world, where magic is basically built into everything. Now, I'm going to talk about some fantasy books where first person, I feel, doesn't work very well. Red Queen. We're going to start off with this. Now, I did enjoy Red Queen when I was reading it, but upon trying to reread, it is not great. It is a fantasy where people have different colored blood, and only silvers are supposed to have like these powers, but some reds also have this power. These and the powers are all different. Now, trying to get into that, it's written first person, and oh my god, it's so bad. It. I'm gonna say this right now. The writing is not great. I don't know how I even got through it when I was a teenager. Which is essentially why I have not read Warstorm, because I can't even refresh my memory on the other three books because it is it's so hard to get back into. Like, oh my god. Like, the first book was, yeah. Second book was little harder. Third book kind of got better, and I don't know about the fourth book, but from my memory, that's how things went. Um, so and some people would argue that might be like dystopian, but I feel like it's a fantasy. I feel like it's more fantasy. It's really hard. Yeah, it's more on the fantasy because dystopian's kind of like our world, but like in the future, there's governments that have like built this sort of paradise. So it is fantasy, and first person I feel like is kind of trash for that book, for that series. Of course I don't even know how it ends. I just don't. Um but yeah, so that probably wasn't great. Now, there are also some third person fantasies that aren't great. Okay, well, I can't remember the last third person book that I didn't really like in fantasy, which is fine. Most of the ones that I haven't liked have been in first person, and honestly, it's because first person is harder to pull off with fantasy. Sci-fi, I do have a few gripes. There is there is one particular sci-fi book series that I I cannot read without listening to the audiobook. And if you've seen my videos on those, you will know which ones they are. But we're gonna hold off on talking about those real quick. Fantasy, I just feel like most of the third persons are like pretty good hits. It's harder to do a miss with those just because you're able to do so much with it, and you're not as like limited when you as opposed to when you write first person with fantasy. It's just a lot easier. Yeah, so now we're going to get into the sci-fi section. So there's a lot of things that where you would now I have actually two examples. I'm going to be honest here. Two examples for sci-fi. And one is a third person, one is a first person, I believe. The first example here is uh, Sky, Sky Without Stars, I think. I know I just picked up the book, but like, well, I'll put the images on the screen of the two books that I have read. So, well, listen to. These books are written in third person, and you think, oh, that's nice. It is third person limited, which is really good. But I don't know what it is. I just can't read this. I cannot read it without an audiobook to help me get through it. I have no idea what it is. I, I think it's just the writing is just not my style. It's I really don't know. I wish I did so that I could like figure out why I just am not that interested in these books. But my god, like I know there's a third book and I'm procrastinating because even though it has gotten interesting a little, I really don't care about one of the POVs, and the other I'm starting to not care about either. Like it, it's really not there. Like I don't know. It's really awful. Uh, now there's another sci-fi series which I have done the first one of, and I do want to see where it goes. I do, but there's a reason I haven't done the second book, and that is the Red Rising series by I can't read that. It's all dark in the rest of this room. Yeah, so that's written in first person, and that's one of those instances where I feel like first person just doesn't work as well. I don't know. It's really hard to explain, but I just feel like it doesn't work as well as third person limited would. Uh, like no fault on this dude who I for the life of me can't remember the name of. No fault to him. He's doing great. Like the whole concept is great. I just feel like it's not it's not like I like the concept and the world, but I feel like third person would make it better. Personally. Now, I'm obviously a great advocate for third person limited. Uh, I write in third person limited for my fantasy series. And I get it. I get that a lot of authors love to write in first person because they feel like it's more personal. However, if you are dealing with a world that is very detailed, very, very, like, it relies on a lot of world building, maybe don't do first person. Now, granted, there are some books where first person would be a benefit. I just can't think of anything. Even with Sky Without Stars, like, I feel like it's just the writing style. And it's not like the POV. Honestly, this is all just my own opinion. This is going to be a hell of a video to edit. But yeah, so yeah, my reasonings for preferring third person over first person for the genres that I read are world building, a lot easier for third person. It's it's easier for certain people to get into, like me, and it's it just allows you to get a sense of the world a lot better. But you know what? That's my opinion. uh, I would love to hear others' opinions in the comments below because I know this is a topic that a lot of people can get into. But yeah, sound off in the comments about your opinions. I would love to see them. I would love to start a conversation about this, honestly. And yeah, so I hope you all enjoyed this. If you did, give it a like. If you want to see more content from me, hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you get notified when I post a new video. And I will see you all in the next one. See ya!